Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Saturday. Hopefully, we are having an all right start to the weekend out there. And I mean, it has been quite a couple of days here across much of the Southeast, especially the states of Florida, Georgia, and both Carolinas, even into Tennessee, where unfortunately we have just seen catastrophic impacts from what was once Major Hurricane Helene. Now, this intro is going to be a little lengthy, so if you don't want to listen to it, I completely understand. I have timestamps below. You can kind of skip ahead to at whatever point you want, which will actually get into the forecasting portion of the video. But I do want to just quickly recap here and discuss Helene a little bit. So, it was quite the storm, and I would say it was forecasted pretty well. I've talked a lot on the channel about the potential for generational impacts, and folks, when I put things like that in the thumbnail, I don't put it with the hope of you clicking on a video. If that was the case, then any storm that happens, I would tell you it's going to be once in a lifetime. But I truly felt that way about Helene, looking at the impacts that I was expecting, and unfortunately, that's kind of exactly what happened here, especially into the mountains of North Carolina. And I'm not saying this to take away from you folks down into Florida, but obviously I was down there chasing it with Mitch West. And, we saw the impacts, but I mean, some of the scenes out of North Carolina are just truly horrific. Towns completely washed away, towns that have been there for a very long time. So again, it's just one of those storms that you never want to see happen. I don't want to see it again. And I really would never wish a storm like that on anybody. I don't really wish any storms on anybody at all. Just, unfortunately, you forecast what you think is going to happen in the hopes that you can help prepare people and prevent as much loss of life and property as possible. Now, with all that said, I do want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in to all the live streams, who recently joined the channel over the past week, subscribed, any donations we got. It was, again, a very big week for growth, and unfortunately, hate to see it, hate to see the reason that it came, but still nonetheless very thankful for all of that. So, again, we appreciate that from all of you. I guess that's kind of all. Again, just keep everyone in your thoughts and prayers here in the Southeast, and I guess I'll add this as well. We're going to talk in this video about the potential of another storm system in the Caribbean and Gulf. I'm going to go ahead and start right now and tell you, I am not expecting another Helene. Again, Helene is an anomaly of a storm. I mean, whenever you say Helene, go ahead and throw it in names like Andrew or Hugo or, Katrina, in that ballpark, because, some people felt impacts that they will never forget out of a storm like that. And I'm not expecting that again with this next one. Now, it could still be a big storm. It could, bring impacts. It could even be a hurricane for all I know. But again, just the overall synoptic setup for Helene was really just something you don't see very often. So I'll leave it at that, and we can go ahead and start talking about the forecast. Okay, so starting with satellite imagery here over kind of an Atlantic-wide view, a couple areas to circle and note. One up here to the north, that is Hurricane, Isaac, sorry. And actually, you know what? I'm going to have to pull up the names for the future names, so we will do that whenever we get there. So that's Hurricane Isaac. To the south, we have, I think, a Tropical Storm Joyce. Again, I'm going to pull this list up right now, but I'm pretty sure that is Tropical Storm Joyce down that way. And then behind it, we have another area to watch from the National Hurricane Center, and then a new area to watch down into the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. Also, I know you're probably thinking, well, why does this person have no idea what the names of these storms are? Again, it has been a very long 48 hours, and I have not really looked at a weather model before this morning preparing for the video in quite some time, and unfortunately I forgot to look at the hurricane names when I was doing that. So yeah, we've got Hurricane Isaac to the north, the Tropical Storm Joyce to the south, and then two other areas to watch. So that's kind of what we're seeing then over the continental United States. This is the remnants of Helene / an upper level low that it merged with, which is still bringing some impactful weather, just not nearly what we were seeing a couple days ago, which is obviously good news. All right, I do want to go ahead and quickly show you the NHC map. Then we're going to start with the tropics. We're going to talk about the tropics. Then we'll zoom into the lower 48, talk about what we're expecting over the next day or two, and then talk about the long range a little bit here outside of the tropics. So again, we talked about, or not really talked about, but we showed you Hurricane Isaac up here to the North Atlantic, Tropical Storm Joyce down towards the main development region. Again, Helene is still kind of parked right over the Paducah area of Kentucky, but no longer a tropical system, really just an upper level low that is still holding on to the name Helene. And then two areas down to watch, one in the Gulf and one in the main development region. Both of these areas in orange are running a medium chance of development within the next 7 days. This one in the Caribbean is at a 40% chance. The one out here in the main development region is at a 60% chance. Then the next 7 days, 20% chance. in the next 48 hours. So again, development is very possible here with these systems. And I want to go ahead and just start off with some good news here. Let's start with Hurricane Isaac. Obviously, a powerful Category 2 hurricane, borderline Category 3, pretty close to it, and an impressive look on satellite. But the good news here with Isaac is not expected to bother anybody. This is going to pull up north into the North Atlantic and probably even miss the UK and Ireland. So we're getting very lucky with that dreaded I name. Almost every year it feels like the I storm is a rough one. This year, not going to have to worry about it. So that is some good news. Tropical Storm Joyce, also some good news here. Going to kind of just die out here due to harsh conditions over the Atlantic before ever reaching anybody. In fact, expected to get back down to a remnant low by Tuesday. So good news here with Joyce as well. So we get through the I name, we get through the J name without any impacts from those two. And then obviously all eyes will turn to the other two areas, which we will go ahead and talk about right now, starting with that area to watch out into the Atlantic. Again, more out into the central and main development region of the Atlantic Ocean. Then we'll talk about that Caribbean and Gulf potential, and we will then move on to the second portion of the video. All right, so latest model guidance here. This is the GFS. It does spin this system up pretty quickly out here just kind of west of the Cabo Verde Islands. And forms it, quite frankly, into a pretty powerful hurricane over the next 7 days. I'll move this ahead. And again, let me just point out, this is Joyce. This would be, let's see, what was the next name on the list? This would be Kirk right behind it that would develop. And I think what, again, could become Kirk could have the potential to make a run at major hurricane status. Here's the GFS. Again, develops us getting this into a hurricane by early this coming week in that Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe, and then really deepens it into a major hurricane, pressure getting down into the 940s from a week from now. But here's the good news. You notice pretty predominantly we're making that turn out to sea here with Kirk, which obviously we want to see with such a powerful storm system. And again, could get into a major hurricane status. And then kind of pulls on out of here in the long run. So that is good news on the models. Now, with that said, I don't want to completely tell you we're out of the woods because you never say that at this point. If Hurricane Florence taught anybody anything, hopefully it's that you never say never when a storm hasn't even gotten halfway through the Atlantic. But the ensembles are a very promising signature here with a lot curving out to sea. Now, there are a couple that try to keep it on a more westward track towards the Antilles and the Leeward Islands, but that is very much in the minority right now. So that's a very unlikely scenario, but we'll continue to monitor it. I'll watch it for you. I'll keep you up to date, obviously, should anything big change, but pretty high hopes that this one's going to curve out to sea. All right, now that gets us to the next area, the area that I think people are going to be very on edge about. And again, I just want to remind everyone, I've said it earlier, I'll say it again in case you skipped that part of the video. Major Hurricane Helene was an anomaly in the world of meteorology. Not every storm is like Helene. In fact, 1 out of maybe 100 are anywhere even close to Helene, probably even lower than that, honestly, odds-wise. I don't want you to completely start stressing over the Gulf and the Caribbean. I know we're going to have some folks that are really, again, just due to what Helene did through some of these communities, are going to really be on edge with the weather for a while. And probably some people, their lifetime, are going to be a little more on edge than they were beforehand. Now, the conditions down here do not look nearly as primed up as they were for Helene. And also the synoptic setup that brought Helene the way it did and brought the rainfall it did and the speed of the storm, which brought the winds further inland that it did, is, again, just so rare that it's very unlikely we see it again. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into this one and kind of talk about what this setup is. All right, so looking at the Caribbean right now, you're thinking, well, not a whole lot going on. We've got some shower and storm activity kind of moving through Hispaniola, and that could help kind of be the start of what we're watching. But you'll notice we do have a little bit of spin kind of down here into portions of the far southwestern portion of the Caribbean. We do have a little bit of vorticity down here, and what is expected to happen is kind of like what happened with Helene. This will get pulled northward towards the Gulf of Mexico, where conditions could become more favorable for development here. And then eventually work its way into the Gulf of Mexico. So let's take a look at some model guidance, and we'll start with the GFS here and kind of dive into what it's showing. All right. So I will mention here the GFS. Did very well with Helene in forecasting it, and that's why I began to show it a lot in the previous videos, kind of right up before Helene, and I told you I thought it was handling the storm very well. It did very well. Also, some of the hurricane models absolutely nailed it intensity-wise. I want to say it was the HMON that upon landfall, it could not have forecasted the storm better. So it is an encouraging sign with some of the model guidance that they're kind of on a roll right now. Also, the good old in-house graph model that a lot of TV stations use in the United States caught a lot of flack on social media. But when I say it nailed it, I mean it nailed it. Brought it right through Augusta, brought it right up the South Carolina line, brought it through the portions of Tennessee, brought it through the graph. Quite frankly, just absolutely nailed the storm. And I won't be afraid to say it did a lot better than the National Hurricane Center did on their forecast track towards the end there. Now, the NHC, the first cone that they released was absolutely dead on point with the track, but they shifted west and never brought it back east like a lot of the models did. And there's going to be some talk and chatter about, did that keep people unprepared? But I still think overall speaking, people in Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, and North Carolina were, they got a good heads up out of this one. Whether you were watching me, or another YouTuber, or just listening to your local National Weather Service office, especially the NWS office in Greenville, Spartanburg, kudos to those folks with the messaging they sent out even before the massive floods in North Carolina. I mean, they were sending out some crazy wording that I don't really know how they could have warned anybody any better. So again, just kudos to some of those meteorologists. All right, though, now talking about the Gulf. Again, sorry, bit of a tangent there, but that's going to happen for a while. After big storms like this, there's going to be little tangents in the videos to talk about them. But, okay, here we go. So latest GFS. We'll get this into early this week, and you'll notice what happens. Again, like I said, down here in the far southwestern Caribbean, low pressure begins to develop and kind of close off here into a bit of a tropical system, and then strengthens, pulls up north through the Caribbean by the middle of this week. This is Wednesday afternoon, October 2nd. So getting into the month of October here, and I've told you before, I'll tell you again, October can be a big month sometimes. We got to watch it because it has that potential. Another thing I will note here on the models is kind of watch what's happening down here in the Bay of Campeche, or Campeche, or again, however you want to pronounce it. The GFS also spins up another little area, and we've even noticed this on the ensembles. A lot of them, obviously with this storm, and some of the ensembles also try to form a different storm kind of down here into the Bay of Campeche, which could actually, hinder development of the storms. When you get storms really close to each other, oftentimes they kind of mess with each other and fight over an environment and kind of keep both of them weak. So we'll see if that's something that happens, but we pull this ahead into time. The GFS really pulls the Caribbean system up and makes that the dominant storm system, and we get a tropical storm moving into the Gulf of Mexico, very similar to where Helene moved in by the end of this work week. Now, at that point, the storm continues to work through the Gulf, pulls north, but I want you to notice the strength here. I mean, we're entering the Gulf at 990 millibars, and then we're pulling north, and we're getting up towards Louisiana at 987 millibars. So not an explosive environment, kind of like, Helene was, at least right now on the models. That's what it looks like, which is good news. And then, the GFS pulls this up and we get a landfall really somewhere in between New Orleans and Appalachia Bay, we'll say, by the time we get into next weekend, about a week or so from now, as really only a tropical storm on this model, which obviously, again, would bring impacts, but I don't want you to compare this to Helene. Right now, it looks like a completely different animal in a much better way for all of us. So again, that is some good news there, but nonetheless, it is still a tropical system we need to watch. And again, anytime you put something in the Gulf, you're going to want to treat it with a lot of care. All right, European model, let me back this up a little bit. You'll notice the good news on the European is we don't really get much of anything. Now, I'll move this ahead a little bit. This is Tuesday. We get a little bit of some troughing here, indicating that a wave tries to develop down into the Caribbean, but just doesn't really fully do it until we get kind of further out into time. And you'll notice then we get into the middle of the week, and again, trying to spin up this area in the Bay of Campeche, kind of, fighting different levels of vorticity, both trying to become dominant in different places. And then the European kind of gets it more dominant again in the Bay there, and then pulls it northward into the Gulf as really just a weak tropical wave, a very elongated big area of low pressure through this coming week. And you're, again, probably wondering, well, where's the storm? And then we finally get this out, and here we go. About a week, 7, 8, 9 days from now, we get a storm to fully develop into the Gulf of Mexico as kind of, again, this gyre setup. So this big, elongated area of low pressure, which never really truly forms into a storm. It's still just this big wave that, again, would bring unsettled weather, but nothing like what we saw this past weekend, but would definitely bring a rain threat, and should it fully consolidate here, bring a bit of a wind threat as well. So I just want to show this to you another way. The vorticity on the European, kind of watch what happens here early this week. We've got multiple areas of spin down into the Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico. And basically what's happening on the models here is they're all just kind of fighting for dominance. And until one of them can kind of fully do it, you're going to struggle to get a named storm. Now, by the time we get to the middle of the week, the European really likes that Bay of Campeche area a good bit compared to some of the other areas of vorticity. And then, it almost even tries to pull some vorticity out of the Pacific Ocean into the Atlantic Ocean to get that storm going. And then again, towards the end, finally tries to do it, but still kind of just this elongated big area of spin that isn't fully condensed or consolidated, I guess. So, good news there that the storm is kind of struggling to get its act together on at least that model. All right, Canadian model spins this up pretty quickly like the GFS in the Caribbean and then pulls it up into the Gulf of Mexico. But again, you'll notice similar to the GFS, doesn't really strengthen it a ton. Goes from about 1,000 millibars down to 990. So still a tropical storm for sure. Probably even a higher grade tropical storm, maybe 60, 70 mile an hour winds. And, brings plenty of rain here through portions of Florida. Sorry about that. Something just fell behind me. But brings plenty of rain through portions of Florida. But then what happens is the steering currents break down and you get a trough and then it kind of scoots it back south and east and then dies out. So again, just another model to show you and kind of look at there. Final model we'll look at is the Icon model. And a similar setup here, kind of tries to spin this up in the Caribbean, pulls it north into the Gulf, and finally gets itself together as really, again, still just a tropical storm, and then kind of meanders around a little bit and doesn't make a direct landfall. So the good news there is most of the models are in agreement that this is going to more than likely be a tropical storm to a lower end hurricane. Again, don't rule anything out, and here's why, because we'll look at the ensembles and you'll notice this is again very similar to kind of how Helene started. We've got a split in the ensembles. We've got some that kind of try to bring that vorticity into the Bay of Campeche, develop something down there, and then you have another section of them that kind of pull this out of the Caribbean as a named storm and thus give it a higher chance of developing into something stronger into the Gulf of Mexico. And it's going to be a battle we see through the models for a while, and it is kind of eerie in a way because this is exactly how Helene started. But again, I want to remind you, the environment, even if this does take the stronger path, I think is going to be much less favorable than Helene's environment. Also, synoptically, this one looks a lot more likely to stall out or kind of meander compared to get ripped north through the southeast and bring that wind field very far inland. So again, not expecting another Helene here, which is some good news. We'll show you some more ensembles. These are the European, the last were the GFS. You get the idea that we've kind of got a split here down the middle. One side has this kind of, meandering through the Bay of Campeche. Another side gets this a little bit stronger in the Caribbean and then pulls it up north towards kind of, we'll say, Mississippi or New Orleans, eastbound here through the state of Florida. Again, though, even the stronger solutions only getting this into tropical storm to lower end hurricane strength. So some good news there. All right, let's take a look at what's going on out there right now. We do have, again, the big story is what's left of Helene, this kind of massive area of spin that you see over the central part of the country. This is more of an upper level low than anything that kind of combined with Helene and is now, just kind of was lucky enough to take the name of the remnants of Helene due to the combining pieces of energy. And this will bring some, sporadically impactful weather over portions of the east central part of the country through the day today and through tomorrow. In fact, we're already seeing it. We take a look at radar here. Again, nothing going on out west, so I'll zoom it in for you into the east. But we do have some pretty widespread showers here through portions of Ohio, Kentucky, back down towards Indiana, Illinois, seeing some pretty good rain here. Even seeing some rain kind of getting pulled back up through Florida due to kind of the flow here. Some rain back up through portions of the East Coast here, specifically New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island, seeing some of that rain. Good news is we're seeing less rain back towards North Georgia, upstate South Carolina, and western North Carolina, where we got absolutely rocked over the past, really the past 4 or 5 days we had rain in that area. So again, some better conditions to begin the cleanup effort today, but it is breezy through much of the region, again, due to this low pressure system, especially where it's raining there through Kentucky, going to bring some of that winds a little bit closer to the surface. All right, rainfall, again, it was a mess over the past couple of days. We still have flash flood warnings in effect, specifically the town of Boone, kind of where App State is, if you're familiar with this part of the country. Still flash flood warnings. I mean, Boone, which I have never seen downtown Boone flood in my life, flooded yesterday. And unfortunately, all of this water and rain that fell up here into the mountains is going to have to go back downstream through the Saluda River, the Catawba River, back down into a lot of these river basins. And even down here through Georgia, you'll notice all these little green boxes. These are flood warnings for these rivers that are likely to rise, if they're not already rising, out of their banks due to all of this water flowing downward. So it's gonna be a mess for a while in the Carolinas and Georgia and even into the panhandle of Florida as all of this water tries to get its way back into the Atlantic Ocean through the water cycle here. But it's gonna take time. I don't know what to say. It's going to take time, unfortunately, folks. Outside of there, nothing else too crazy happening. I know we've got some other boxes. We can see it. This might just be for fire weather. So, some fire weather out here potentially up into the northern Great Plains. We're watching for that. I think same story. Excessive heat warnings down here through the desert southwest. It's very hot. So need to watch for that as well. But really, the flooding threat is my bigger concern compared to anything else. Now, unfortunately, we are going to see some rain in some areas that don't really need it. So this afternoon, again, I mentioned kind of raining around that upper level low, kind of a band of some heavier rain to the north here through northern Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, back through the Erie, Pennsylvania area and into the northeast. Again, heavier rain for you folks. But right over the center of the low, kind of a misty, dreary, wet, light rain kind of forecast for today. And that'll continue. Now, we get into this afternoon, and unfortunately, we could see enough destabilization in front of this thing that some more showers and storms try to pop up here through the mid-Atlantic and southeast. We'll watch for that. But I'm not expecting too much of a severe weather threat today. And then that kind of stuff out in front of the system should die down a little bit during the overnight, I think, as we lose some of that heating. But then we get into tomorrow afternoon, and this low still sitting over the exact same places. So still dreary through the Tennessee River Valley, up through Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia. And then tomorrow afternoon, watching for potentially a bigger threat of some more showers and storms here through the mid-Atlantic to fire along this system. Again, anywhere kind of into this region where we're going to get some heating out on that divergent side of this. We'll need to watch for the potential of showers and storms, and don't rule out a severe storm tomorrow through the Carolinas, Virginia. I think it could be a possibility. And then this kind of just hangs around here before it finally starts to move offshore, again, continuing to bring some rain with it, and again, places we don't need it through the weekend and through the early part of next week. But by the time we get to Tuesday, I think this will kind of finally be out of our hair, which will be some good news. All right, so what's coming on down the line here? Well, looking at our 500 millibar map, again, I'll go ahead and show you the remnants of Helene die out and kind of finally scoot out of here. This is by Tuesday afternoon. You'll notice that area of blue getting back out off into the Atlantic, but we are watching a bit of a meridional flow to kind of set up shop here. And basically what I mean by that is we're just going to see dips in the jet stream. And I think we're going to get a pretty big one at one point this week that clips the northern part of the country here through the northern Dakotas, through the Great Lakes, and into the northeast. Could bring a storm system and could also cool things down significantly. You'll notice how that little bit of blue clips the northern part of the country. This is Tuesday afternoon. We go into Wednesday and Thursday. You see the northeast kind of getting in on some of those lower heights, meaning cooler and stormy weather. And then behind it, a big ridge builds back in, but it's really more of a zonal flow here. You notice how these isobars are just moving east to west across the country. So that's going to keep things mild, but not super hot here through this coming weekend. This would be. And then after that, another big dip in the jet stream I'm watching for in the 10-day range. And this could affect our track here of potential, well, let's see, what would the name be? Again, I have the list pulled up here. That could be Leslie. So the L name is Leslie because, again, Kirk is probably going to form in the Atlantic. So, again, that could be Tropical Storm Leslie that we could be watching into the Caribbean and Gulf. So this big trough in about 10 days that I'm watching for, which could really cool things down, could bring a potent storm system, could also affect the track of what would be Leslie. And this trough has the potential to maybe get our first snow outside of the higher terrains. I am watching that for you folks in the Dakotas coming on down the line. All right, so rainfall precipitation map here. You'll notice, again, there's what we're going to just continue to call Helene spinning away, but finally kicking on out of here. This is Monday afternoon, still dealing with some rain on the backside of that through the Virginias, Ohio, through the Delmarva, back into the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. But finally, we get this to Tuesday afternoon. And I think that's much less of an influence on our weather. Now, at that point, though, again, here comes this big trough, and you're noticing some storms firing on the divergent side of this. So this will increase the storm chance again from a different storm system, but I think really through the Northeast, the Great Lake region, and down into the Ohio River Valley, Kentucky, the Virginias, Ohio northbound, I'd say, could see some showers out of this. But notice this pocket of very cold air up into it, up through Canada. So if this thing trends a little bit further south, we could get some pretty cool air later this week, and you'll notice that that kind of clips through the Northeast. You get a storm system that tries to form on it off the coast, but hopefully that'll stay far enough off the coast, doesn't bring any problems. And at this point, through the second half of this week, much nicer weather takes over through the Southeast. We can really kind of begin to finish up that cleanup process. I say finish up. It's going to take a while, folks. Again, especially, I know a lot of people don't have internet and power right now. We have so many power outages in this corridor of the Southeast. It's going to take time to fix it, so just be patient with your power line crews and anybody else that's kind of fixing really any kind of infrastructure at all. All right, that swings on through, and then I'm watching by next weekend another trough. Again, I talked about meridional flow. There's going to be a couple of these big dips that kind of swing on through, and how far south they get will be a big-time storyline that we need to monitor for exactly who gets the worst of it or the cooler weather. But by this point anyway, through next weekend, we'll be watching what's going on in the Gulf to impact our weather anyway. But again, you notice these big storm systems trying to cross on through the country. All right, temperature-wise, it's kind of dreary, damp, and cool into much of the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys today, which is nice, I would imagine, compared to a lot of the heat that we've been seeing. We move this ahead into time. Obviously, as that upper level low gets out of here, it'll warm back up. But again, watching these dips in the jet streams, bringing these cooler temperatures, here's the middle of the week through portions of the Northeast and Ohio River Valley seeing some blue. And then it kind of warms up again behind it. But behind it, once again, we get even more kind of cool shots of air. It's going to come and go. Some folks, it's going to be well above average at times. Other folks, it's going to be more average to slightly below average. But like I said, in the long run, watch what happens here. I am watching the potential of some more big cool downs going a little bit closer to the middle of October. So again, this is 10 plus days out, but I do think we're going to switch up the pattern here at some point and kind of get out of this nonstop above average temperatures that we're dealing with. All right, total rainfall. Again, we could pick up a good inch, maybe 2 inches here through portions of Kentucky, Tennessee, through the mountains of the Virginias. Unfortunately, also could pick up some rain into western North Carolina where we really don't need it. But luckily, this is more of a kind of steady light rain. At times could become heavy, but not just a non-stop downpour like we saw earlier with Helene. So again, and this is rain through the next week. This is all the way, just 7 days out. So nothing that we can't handle outside of the mountains. Unfortunately, again, the damage is kind of already done in portions of western North Carolina. So another inch on top of it. Obviously not good, but it's not going to redo what we just saw. It's just going to kind of delay the process of some of these rivers and streams going down. All right, through the Mid-Atlantic, again, watching a bit of a hotspot for rainfall into the Delmarva up through the DMV, through western Maryland. Could see, 1 to 3 inches of rain over the next week. Up through the Northeast, some rain. Again, with that meridional flow, a couple storm systems trying to work on through this part of the country. Could bring some brief showers or storm activity at times as that moves on through. All right, temperature probability outlook 6 to 10 days out. You'll notice due to that those kind of storm systems clipping the east, more average out into this region here temperature-wise. Out west, well above average likely in that time frame. Rainfall-wise, again, higher chances of above average precipitation along the Gulf Coast due to that uncertainty with the forecast in the tropics, and then some higher precipitation forecast again up through New England, where, like I said, these storm systems are going to try to kind of cross one by one. Could bring some rainfall chances for you. And then we're drying out big time back towards the Rockies here in the 6 to 10 day outlook. Alrighty, folks. Again, it has been a gauntlet here over the past couple of days, but we got to keep on trucking along. We got more systems to watch here, and again, not expecting anything like we saw with Helene in the near future. But we do still need to watch the tropics because we could see another flare up there into the Gulf. All right, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.